Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. I'm here today to do my July wrap up. Alright, it feels like it's been quite a while since I have stood in front of my camera or my phone to film a video for you guys because I have been traveling. However, I am back and I am happy to be back. I will say while I was on this trip, I was kind of reevaluating, just kind of checking in with myself to make sure that I was still enjoying making these videos, and considering there came a point in the trip where I really started to miss making the videos and editing. I know that I am still having a grand old time with this hobby, and I hope that you guys are having a grand old time with this channel as well. That being said, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, so good news, yay. That being said, July, I struggle to call it a bad reading month, but I didn't rate anything over a 4-star. So this is the first month where I haven't had a single 5-star, and the fact that I didn't have any 4.5 stars either is a little bit concerning, but despite that, I still don't want to call it a terrible reading month. Because I was traveling so much, I was reading primarily KU books, a couple books that were already on my Kindle, and some audiobooks. So as usual, I will go ahead and give you some basic stats about the month, and then I will go ahead and review the books from my lowest rated to my highest rated. In the month of July, I managed to read 9 books, which is definitely on the higher side of what I have been reading this year, which is exciting. I'm kind of hoping that means that I'm slowly but surely getting out of the slump that I have been sitting in for a couple of months. On top of that, I ended up reading 1,931 pages, which is way more than I read in the month of June, which was at under 700 pages. I also read and completed 2 audiobooks, putting my hours at 25.59. Despite the fact that my ratings were on the lower side, my average rating for this month is a 3.61, which is not the lowest of the year by 0.01%. And luckily, my average rating for the year is still above a 4-star average. So hopefully this is the only month with no 5 stars, but it hasn't completely derailed my goal of having an average rating of over 4 stars for the year. So let's get into the first book and my most disappointing, and disappointing it was, and that is going to be King of Hell by Morgan Dante. This is a book that I've been considering reading for a while since the synopsis really spoke to me. This is also an author that I've read before, and I had a good time with their writing, so I was pretty optimistic. This is a fantasy paranormal story. We are following a vampire. I cannot pronounce either of the characters' names, so I apologize in advance for referring to them as the vampire and the King of Hell. But he has been in hell for about 30 years. The husband of his sire and lover ended up killing him, and he wants revenge for that. He is someone who serves the King of Hell in the court of the traitors, and he's always like, but I'm not a traitor. I never betrayed anyone. I was betrayed. And he and this king have gotten relatively close, and one day the King of Hell tells him that, hey, is there something you want to do? Because I'm kind of bored, so let's go do something. And our vampire informs him that he would like to go up to Earth and kill his ex-lover as well as his lover's husband. And the King of Hell is like, let's do it. And so they go up to the human realm, the realm of the living. Not all are living because there is a zombie apocalypse going on right now. And I figured with all of that it would be a really interesting, fun story. However, to me, everything felt so flat. The characters, the relationship between the characters, the dialogue, the world building, all of it was bland. I also felt like it really needed to be edited. There are so many times where I could tell that there were words there that weren't supposed to be there, that words were out of order. I also felt like sometimes what the author was saying just didn't fully make sense, and it really took me out of the story. I really think the author just needs to go into the story and just clean it up because it has a lot of potential. I ended up rating this 2.5 stars. So yikes. That makes it one of the lowest rated books of the year. I think I've only given maybe 2 other books a rating this low. Luckily, it was on the shorter side. I really, despite it being short, found myself wishing it would end. The only part that I really enjoyed was their casualness for murder. They were just like, yeah, let's go kill some people. I'm bored. Let's go kill some people. You killed someone? That's okay. And I found that aspect really funny and it had me laughing. However, everything else about the story, like even the climactic ending, was so underwhelming. It was just probably one of my most disappointing reads of the year so far. Talking about disappointing reads, I had one 3-star read, and that is going to be the I Got Abducted by Aliens and Now I'm Stuck in a Rom-Com by Kimberly Lemming. That's a really long title, so I'm not sure if I got it 100% correct. I have read her Help, I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon series. I read all 3 of those. I had a good time with them. They were a lot of fun. However, this one did not work for me, and I will not be continuing this series, unfortunately. I'm sure that once she moves on to another series or something, I will definitely, check out her work again. But I'm like, nah, this world, I don't need to be part of it. Essentially, this follows a scenario where a human woman is abducted and she is brought to another planet with the specific goal of having her breed with the locals. Essentially, we are following this human woman along with the lion that she accidentally got abducted with as they kind of traverse this new world, and they find 2 different alien men who are from, I think, like warring clans, or at least their clans are like beefing, and both of them end up falling for her and she ends up falling for both of them. So this is technically a poly romance, which usually I enjoy, but there was no connection between these characters. Like, I felt zero chemistry because it was kind of like a breeding program. They kind of were shot with like a serum that made them all horny and stuff, and so it felt very much like their connection came from that serum more so than from any sort of actual connection that they had through being with each other, which was rather disappointing. I also didn't really enjoy the world. It was kind of like this humorous, we tried to recreate the planet, but we didn't really do a good job studying, and so we accidentally brought the dinosaurs back kind of situation. And I feel like that could be fun, but for me, it personally just was a little too silly goofy, so it didn't really work for me. I also found myself just not that interested in the plot, as well as some of the other characters that we met who could potentially be main characters for other books in the series, and that's really what got me to decide that no, I don't need to continue with this series. This personally didn't work for me. My favorite part was Toto the lion. I thought that he was a great character, but everyone else didn't really work for me. I ended up giving out 2 3.5-star ratings this month. The first was another disappointment, and that is Holy Terrors by Margaret Owen. This is the 3rd and final book, hopefully final book, in the Little Thieves series. I really enjoyed book 1. I really enjoyed book 2, but I went into this series thinking it was a duology, and I didn't realize until reading like the final chapter of book 2 that the author was going to extend this series. Was that necessary? In my opinion, not at all. So I really went into this book thinking that it was not necessary, and the book kind of continued to prove that I was right. Did I continue to enjoy the characters? Did I continue to enjoy their banter? Yes, but I felt like I've always been slightly confused by this story because it has a lot of references and names that I don't understand, that are combined with a kind of messy mystery situation, which, considering I've been listening to these as audiobooks, sometimes means I'm just here for the vibes. But this time it was confusing to the point where I couldn't even like ignore the fact that I was confused. There was a lot of crossroads discussions. You know, I come to a crossroads and I had taken this path, this and this and this and this would have happened, but I didn't take this path. I took this path, and so this and this and this and this happened. But there's another version of me that had taken this and this path, and now I'm connecting with this person. So I was like, what? Honestly, I felt like I was reading Gideon the Ninth all over again, and I decided not to continue Gideon the Ninth because I am okay with being a little confused, but I have a limit for how confused I can be, and this one unfortunately just left me being like, okay, I don't know what happened, but we're just gonna go with it. So I gave it a 3.5 stars for the characters that I continue to love, but everything else about the story was just messy in my opinion, but maybe it's just because I'm not smart enough to get what's going on. The other 3.5 was A Bro and the Beast by L.C. Davis, and this is co-written with Joel Abernathy. This was a book where I originally was like, I'm not going to continue with this series because it is going to have some MPreg moving forward, but then I said, Natalie, stop being a coward. You're gonna read this MPreg, okay? So I will be continuing this series. Was it my favorite? No, I don't read a lot of, I think it's called Omegaverse. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Because to me, it just feels a little toxic. You know, it's not my favorite setup. I think this book worked a little bit more for me because it took a humorous spin to the Omegaverse world. Essentially, we have this frat bro. He's a total dude bro, and he has a twin brother who loves these Omegaverse stories. And he was teasing his twin about it. They get into a fight. His brother storms off, and he's like, I need to fix this. And the best way for me to do this is to read the book, and we can connect over it. And so he starts reading it, and he's like, this guy is a stalker. This alpha guy is a weirdo. This Omega girl's super weak and flimsy. Like, what is this? And then he remembers he's got to go to a party. So he drives off into the rain and gets in a car accident. And when he wakes up, he is in the story. And he finds that he is now an Omega. And this alpha has got his peepers on him. And he's like, whoa, I'm straight-ish. So this story is really funny. It really is. And I think it does tackle some of the issues with the Omegaverse. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with it, but often it seems like these poor little Omegas are like property and people keep trying to like either kill them or trap them. And to me, it often feels like no matter if the Omega is male or female, they are treated the way that women have been treated throughout history. And so that's why I struggle with it, because of them being seen as like this property that just doesn't have rights over their own body and life. This book, to a degree, does have our character pushing back against that, which I appreciated, because he was like, do you see how swole I am? Do you see these muscles? Okay, I'm not some weak Omega. I will beat you up. And everyone's like, we don't know what to do with this. And the alpha's like, my Omega's not like others. And so it's really funny. I had a good time with it. Am I a little scared to go into MPreg? I have avoided that trope mostly because I don't like pregnancy in general. Yeah, I'm a little scared, but we are trying new things. And I heard from other people that they really enjoy this series and that it is just a fun, good time. And I'm here for a fun, good time. The last 5 books I need to talk about were all rated 4 stars. The first being Vespertine by Lita Black, and this is a male-male romance between a priest and a rock star. These two used to be friends. We have Jazz and we have Nikki. However, once their relationship at the age of 17 started to turn romantic, Jazz ended up telling Nikki they couldn't be together because he feels a call to the church, and Nikki runs off to LA, becomes a rock star, and Jazz becomes a priest. Unfortunately, that rock star life has kind of caught up with Nikki, and he is suffering from a drug addiction. He goes to rehab, and he has come home to recover, to find his support system and just learn how to live as a sober man again. And there, of course, he is reconnected with Jazz. And Jazz realizes that he is partially to blame for Nikki's downward spiral, and so he's really committed to helping him. But is he only helping him out of guilt, or can he just not stay away from Nikki? That's the question. I ended up giving this 4 stars because of the length. To be honest, that is the main reason. This book, if it had been shorter, could have been a 4.5, 5-star read, but due to its length, it just felt like it dragged, especially towards the end of the book. I was like, come on, guys. And then sometimes it also felt a little bit repetitive, so I was not able to give it a higher rating. So I'm like, curses, why could you not make your book shorter? There are definitely parts you could have cut out. But the relationship, oh my gosh, just because it was like so taboo, and just watching Jazz like going back and forth and being like, oh, you know, I really love serving the church, but I also love Nikki. And then on top of that, Jazz also has this queer center that he runs where queer foster children can stay, since foster situations are often not a safe place for them. And I just loved his dedication to those children, and the fact that he, more importantly, chose those children over the wishes of the church. He was like, no, I'm gonna do what's best for these kids, even if that means I have to choose them over my role in the church. And a lot of respect for him for doing that. Nikki, on the other hand, reading about his experience with drug addiction, I think that the author did a really good job with that. It wasn't like, yeah, I went to rehab and now I'm totally fine and I'm just gonna continue with my life. He's like, I gotta avoid alcohol. I'm gonna be medicated for the rest of my life. I need to make sure that I have a support system. I need to see a therapist. I need to learn things like meditation and yoga and taking care of my body and just finding ways to make sure that I don't relapse. And he's also struggling with the fact that he feels more comfortable with being sober in his hometown and being scared of going back to like LA, where his drug addiction kind of came about, and having to face that place again. So lots of great things in the story, just too long. Up next, we have a KU book, and that is Last Courtesan of Olympus by Amanda Moyweisen. This follows a courtesan who is an acolyte of Aphrodite's temple, and he was at the top of his class. Essentially, they learn to give pleasure and to serve the needs of other people as a way to worship Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love. And he's at the top of his class, and he is ready to go and serve a priest. And then one day he would become a priest himself and have courtesans under him. However, that doesn't quite work out, because at their ceremony, he ends up getting snatched up by Zeus, who is deciding to gift him to, I think it was 7 of his brothers or fellow gods. And he tells our courtesan that he needs to sleep with each of these gods, and then he needs to choose one to serve, which is a tricky situation, because our characters, like, if I don't choose one of these gods and they get mad, they will kill me. So our courtesan isn't really excited about this situation, but he is going to do what he can to survive. And essentially in each chapter, we are following him with a different male god as he is figuring out what they need and giving it to them and making sure that they appreciate what he's doing in such a way that they respect his decision at the end and don't try to kill him based off of his decision. I would say my favorite was the first chapter, who was Hephaestus, who is the blacksmith god. He also has disability representation due to the fact that he has a clubfoot. Their scenes together were really sweet and heartwarming. I would also say that I enjoyed, I want to say, was it Apollo? Is he the god of war? Aphrodite's lover? I think so. I really liked him. His was the most BDSM forward, and so I thought that one was a lot of fun. Overall, I really enjoyed the way that the story ended and the direction that the author took the story and the choice that our character made at the end for who they wanted to serve. This author did recently come out with another book that is formatted in a very similar manner. However, it is with the Norse gods, who I am not at all familiar with, but I'm sure that I will go ahead and check it out, and I guess I'll learn a little bit more about the Norse gods in a very smutty manner. The next 4 stars is The Whim of Gods by Mel Bright. A little bit disappointed that I gave this 4 stars. I was thinking that it might lean more towards a 5-star just based off of the synopsis. This is a post-apocalyptic queer monster romance, and we are following a character called Helios, and he has been captured by slavers, but he ends up getting rescued by the Devil of the Wastes, who traverses this post-apocalyptic hellscape in his giant beetle-like machine that is run by an AI system known as Beat, and she is rather sassy. Our Devil of the Wastes is at first rather reluctant to have our character tagging along, but eventually their relationship starts to grow and they work together to figure out who is behind the increase in slave trading that is occurring and figuring out where these people are transported and why. I will say, despite the topic of the slave trade, this book is leaning a little bit more towards the cozy side, in my opinion. There were a lot of what I would consider domestic moments in this where we're just following our characters as they're living in this beetle and just traveling across the land and cooking and reading and just getting to know each other. This definitely has Howl's Moving Castle vibes. It also has some Beauty and the Beast vibes to it if you're into that. I found the world building to be an interesting concept. There isn't too much like in-depth world building that is occurring. Essentially, all of the gods and monsters that we assume to be from myth end up waking up, and it turned out that they had once roamed the earth thousands of years ago and humans had just forgotten that happened, and now they're back and destroying humanity as monsters and gods tend to do. So it's an interesting concept, lots of monsters and gods that we may be familiar with from other stories. But like I said, this is a relatively short book, so it doesn't go too in depth with it. I definitely wouldn't mind reading more books in this world. In fact, there is a second book in this world that follows a character where I was like, I have a feeling we're gonna follow this character, and we are. So I will definitely be checking this out. So despite it being a little bit of a disappointment because it was a little too fluffy and because I was hoping for a little bit more plot, I did have a good time in this world. So I will definitely be checking out more work by this author. Next, we have For the Fans by Nyla K. And this is a book that I've been meaning to read for a long time. This is one of those male-male romances that is highly regarded within the romance community. community. And I would say it definitely, like Vespertine, had the possibility of being a 4.5 5-star read if it weren't so long. This book is over 500 pages. Did it need to be? We know the answer to that. The answer is no. This book is a taboo romance because it is between stepbrothers. Did it feel like a taboo romance to me? No, it didn't. So essentially, these two's parents married when they were 17 years old. So it's not like they grew up together. At no point during the story did the two of them view each other as brothers. They were constantly butting heads from the very beginning. So it never felt like a taboo romance, other than the fact that other people might be like, wait, you're dating your stepbrother? I mean, to me, it wasn't taboo, but maybe it's because I have actually read romances between like actual brothers. So to me, this is pretty mild. But that being said, we have these two stepbrothers. They end up going to the same university. One is the quarterback superstar. The other is an artist. He's an emo. He's a stoner. He doesn't like care too much about college other than the fact that he's hoping to be able to one day make art in a way that makes money. But one day they're told by their parents that they are no longer going to be able to financially support them during college. And so our characters need to find a way to make money and make a lot of money quickly, because this is America and you got to pay for housing, you got to pay for textbooks, you got to pay for classes. It's expensive to go to college here. And our emo boy, Aviel, ends up starting an OnlyFans. And one day he ends up doing a threesome with one of his friends who also has an OnlyFans and his stepbrother. And he ends up sharing it on his page, and his fans are like, we want to see you and that blonde guy that you were with together without the girl. And he approaches his stepbrother Kieran and is like, do you want to make a lot of money fast? And Kieran is very reluctant, but he's like, as long as you blur out my face, sure, let's do it. And that is essentially the plot of this story. It's a sexy time. It's a sexy time. Did I think that the author took too long to get to that point? Yes, I think that we followed them too long as they were teenagers, before they went to college, and then the whole working our way up to when they actually were doing the OnlyFans stuff. Too long. Needed to speed that up a little bit. We all know what we're here for, and it's not character development. That being said, Kieran is in denial about the fact that he is enjoying spending this time with his stepbrother and spending sexy time with a man. And that is really what drags this story out, because Avi is on board pretty quickly. He's like, I guess I'm bi. Okay, that's fine. Let's move on. And then he's like, well, I'm starting to fall for my stepbrother. Okay, that's fine too. And Kieran, on the other hand, is like, I'm not gay. I'm just doing this for the money. I hate my stepbrother. And that is really what caused the story to just drag on. And Kieran has some trauma from his past. So there is a part of me that understands his reaction, but at the same time, I'm like, we could have cut 100 pages out of this just by getting rid of Kieran's stubbornness. So Kieran ended up being my favorite character. I love him. He definitely became my baby, but I think the author really just needed to kind of get him moving a little bit quicker so that we weren't just here watching him spiral and then be like, everything's fine, and then spiral and then be like, everything's fine, and spiral and say everything's fine, which maybe is realistic, but it does get a little bit repetitive and boring to read. So could have been 5 stars, but once again, I think with indie and self-published authors, this happens a lot for me, where I just think that they sit down and they just write the book and then they get too scared to cut anything out, and then it gets too long and repetitive. So I do think that if you've been considering reading this book, it is worth checking out, but you do have to keep in mind that this is a contemporary romance that is over 500 pages, when contemporary romances like never need to be over 500 pages. All right guys, final book that I read that was a 4-star, and the one physical book, and that is going to be a BL manga, and that is There Are Things I Can't Tell You by Idako Mofu. And this, like I said, is a BL manga. It is a friends to lovers situation. It seems like when they were young, they were friends, and then one of them confesses to the other that they are in love with them, and that kind of causes them to go their separate ways. However, at a high school reunion, they end up meeting up again and deciding to restart their relationship or their friendship. They start to be friends again, and throughout this story, we frustratingly watch both of them tell themselves that yes, they are in love with their friend, but at the same time, they feel that their friend's happiness depends on them not telling them that. So it was a very sweet romance. It was really sweet to watch the two of these love each other, really start to come to terms with the fact that they are the one that brings their friend the greatest amount of happiness. And even though it will be difficult for them to live a life as a openly queer couple, it is something that is worth it for them to do if it means that they can be together. So I had a good time with this story. Like I said, it gave it 4 stars. I have had some struggles with finding BL manga that I like, so the fact that I had a success with this one is very exciting. This does have some mature content in it, nothing too crazy. It definitely focuses more on their emotional relationship than their physical relationship, but I did enjoy the art style. So whoops, I'm holding it the wrong way, sorry. So I am definitely glad that I went ahead and checked this book out. All right guys, so those are all the books that I ended up reading in the month of July. Obviously, my least favorite was The King of Hell, unfortunately. If I were to think of my favorite, I think I'm leaning towards Vespertine. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Vespertine. But let me know which book you read this month that was your favorite and your least favorite. As always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!